Disclaimer. The content presented in this video is solely focused on airguns and does not involve real firearms. All activities, discussions, and demonstrations are related to airguns only. We urge YouTube reviewers and viewers to take note that the content is in compliance with YouTube's community guidelines, as it does not promote or involve real firearms in any capacity. Thank you for understanding. Welcome back, friends, to another exciting episode of the Airgun Geeks Podcast. Today, we're on an Airgun Optics Odyssey, zooming into the right choice. Brought to you by the Airgun Geeks. Be sure to stick around to the end, as we've got an exclusive interview with David Ding from UTG Integrix.
And go. And welcome to another episode of the Airgun Geeks Podcast. Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Pat. Honestly, it's a little freaking cold here in California this week. You notice I've got a full-on hoodie on.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've lost a fair amount of weight lately. Actually, I'm over 80 pounds lost since March of 2023. And it has not helped my ability to stay warm. And, you know, cold for us California pansies is, it's in the low 40s in the morning when I get up.
Wow.
And that is unseasonably cold for this time of year. Typically, we're still fairly warm. But yeah, it's been a bit chilly here.
Yeah, I was like, you're a little overdressed. I'm still in a t-shirt, and I think our lows here in Florida was 61. Yeah, it would. You know, I'm a northern boy still, but that was pretty chilly. I'm like, ooh, but wait a minute. I'm not outside. And then it got hot during the day. So, you know, we got, 3 seasons here? You know, if you ask me. So, crazy. Yeah. I think there's a big cold front coming around the whole United States. And it might hit you guys, too.
I think we were first on its list of stops. And I heard on my... I have a weather mini podcast thing on my AI alarm that goes off every morning. And he was talking about finding out if you were in the path of the warming trend that was supposed to come across the United States later this week. So we'll see what happens. I mean, this isn't going to matter topically because we're recording well in advance of when it publishes. So it'll all be out of sync anyway.
Yeah.
But
just crazy weather in the States, that's all.
It is very true.
So, all right. I have seen some smoke coming from the west, and it seems like there's been some battles going on in California. And I was curious if you were part of this battle going on. Were you the one causing all the smoke, Bill?
So I can neither confirm nor deny these allegations. That's the federal parlance for, oh, hell yes, that really happened. But PJ and Chad Kettner talked in a recent video about, trying to battle back against the social media titans to keep our voice. To keep the things that we love to share with our fellow air gunners alive and viable. And, I can't tell you how disheartening it is to put together a piece of video content that you've literally spent a day or two shooting the footage for, a day or two editing. And I don't mean just like you came home from work and did it. I mean, this is really what I do full time. I put my heart and soul in this, and you put all that time and all that effort in, and you hit the upload button up to YouTube, and You've stressed and fretted over the title and the description for your video and a thumbnail, try to get everything just right. And then you get this little pop-up that says, "Oh, we've flagged your video because it violates our community standards." What? No, I didn't. I know your community standards. I know them very well. I've read them frontwards, backwards, sideways. I've read them in my all over the place. I understand what they are. I didn't violate them. This is airgun content. It's an airgun podcast. Says so right in the logo. See, airgun. I'm not. This isn't firearm stuff. So stop beating me with that hammer. And I got in a rather heated chat session, Pat, if I'm honest.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to get the A players in a low level creator chat. I mean, I'm sure if you're somebody like Ted Beer, you probably have a YouTube handler that well, he does. I'm pretty sure he's got somebody he can talk to who can be an advocate for him on the other side of the wall.
Mm-hmm.
But man, the barrier for a small contributor to YouTube, for them to be able to get to at least express their distaste or their critique, it's darn near impossible. And I'm trying to explain to this young lady that, hey, I've worked on it really hard on this content. And, first it was the Nodos episode, which is by far, thanks to everyone who has tuned into that.
Yeah.
Because you guys watching and listening to that have made that our biggest content to date.
Correct.
From a growth perspective. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you
for that effort. That does so much for us. But I said, you demonetize that. And you know why they demonetized it, Pat?
Why?
Because I used a 5-second video clip of me with a Dremel cutting some epoxy on a Nodos. And they flagged that as me modifying a gun on YouTube. And they said, oh, this isn't advertiser friendly. Well, let me tell you what advertiser friendly really means. It's kind of YouTube's way of saying, we don't really like your kind here. And we're going to ask you to move along because we're not going to pay you to do all this work because it's not something we want to promote. And I get it. You're anti-gun. I get it. I understand. But this isn't gun content. It's not firearms content. It's air guns. And you can get into the arguments of the semantics and the esoteric nature of that term. But at the end of the day, the people making these decisions, whether or not to support content or on the YouTube side, the business side, they're not knowledgeable. They don't understand. They already have a personal bias, and they're voting that way. So it's all that much important for our devoted, right?
Yeah, definitely.
For our air gunner guys who love this content and want to see it continue, it's all that much more important to join the Patreons, to join the channels on YouTube, to hit the super thanks button when you watch a video and you say, hey, you know what? I can use that. Click super thanks. It's a couple of bucks. It's $1. At least it helps us out when we get demonetized and we're not going to make scratch off of all of that work.
Correct.
So it is a great way to support the content that you love. And, none of us out here are getting rich in the YouTube world doing content. It takes a long time to grow to the point where you're getting anything out of it. So the best way to keep us around and to keep us working for you, the air gunner, is to support us and to help us out. And there have been some guys, I'm telling you, Pat, I have seen some of the most insane generosity in the airgun world. Back really, really early on, before I was even monetized at all, a guy named Al, who is a fellow falconer, and I don't even know if Joe knows him or not, but he uses falcons to do pest control professionally, and he also uses his air guns, and that's how he and I met. But Al is the real deal. He gave me a GX2 to use on my channel for a modification I wanted to do. I had another viewer. He saw my content on building the solar solution. He freaking sent me a 100 amp hour rechargeable battery because he saw I was stuck.
Wow.
I was stuck with that 25 amp hour battery. He
Yeah.
sent me a big ass battery, paid for it, shipped it to me, didn't ask for anything in return. That is the kind of generosity that our airgun brothers have. And it doesn't need to be a grandiose gift like that. It really doesn't. A dollar or two, again, fills the bucket up quick, but this is our weapon. It's our primary weapon in this battle against being suppressed and being silenced. So do take up arms, so to speak, and
I do agree.
and help us fight that battle. But we're really here to talk today, Patrick, about we're here to scope out the situation. We're here to lower the crosshairs on some things.
I see what you did there. Lower the crosshairs. I love it.
So,
yeah.
And I think, this all started with a young fellow who asked me a question. He said, "Hey, Bill, I'm new to PCP guns. And I don't know what to do for a scope on my Avengex. What's a good scope for my Avengex gun, entry level, mid-cost PCP?" And I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I thought about it. And then I wrote out this diatribe email response to him. And I'm like, what I'd like you to do is step back from this for a minute and divorce the scope choice based on what you spent on the rifle. Let's make this two separate decisions. You bought a good, capable PCP that is capable of really good accuracy. Is it an FX Panthera, or is it a Daystate Red Wolf? No, it's not at that level. But does that mean that you should cheap out on the scope that you're going to put on it? And that's really what I was getting at with divorcing those two decisions from each other. You picked a good gun. It's going to serve you well. If it gets scratched up, you're not going to cry. But having good glass on that gun, Pat, it matters. You know how much it matters.
Oh yeah. My favorite saying is you can't hit what you can't see.
Well, yeah. And what people don't realize, if you've got abundant lighting, it's a bright sunny day out on the range, and you're at 30 yards, and man, you are just stacking pellets in holes, right? I mean, you can do no wrong. That is the perfect, most easiest situation for an optic to perform in, right? You've got lots of light. You've got lots of light coming into that optic. You can easily see. The clarity is pretty good because the answer to cheap glass is lots of light. That's the difference between cheap glass and really good glass, is the amount of light that gets transmitted through that optic. There was a guy in the motorcycle suspension world, still is. He had a saying for people who thought, well, the suspension on my Kawasaki Bloody Blah is just fine. Why would I need to change it? And his comment was, the best you know is the best you've ever ridden. And one way to interpret that is never, ever look through a high quality optic, because you will be ruined forever with how bright that image is. When you look at it, you're in the store and you put that thing up to your eye, you're like, oh my God, what I could read the name on her jeans at 400 yards away. That's the difference good glass makes. And that's what makes it so addictive to someone who's really focused on accuracy as a passion and marksmanship as a passion. So, the notion that, any old piece of glass is going to work. I can still stack pellets at 30 yards on a bright sunny day. What happens when it's dusk? What happens when it's dawn earning light? And you're trying to get that shot on a rabbit that has been absolutely terrorizing your grandmother's garden. That's the difference between making that shot and not making that shot. You are working in an environment where you have creatures that have evolved to utilize their coloring to blend in like crazy. And they are freaking magicians. So are you going to see a difference between a good piece of glass and a bad piece of glass in that role? Hell yeah, you are.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah, it's going to allow things to pop easier for you, and you're going to have the clarity that you need to make those decisions. So, I've heard a lot of people in the online world bashing expensive scopes, like, oh, you don't need all that, just get a blah blah. I absolutely agree with buying whatever is within your budget. Don't refinance your house to buy an optic. All right. Don't trade in your work truck because your boss will be pissed. Just to get a really high end scope. But do divorce the decision between the gun and the scope. Understand what your purpose is for that scope. What's your purpose, right?
Yeah.
How many times did we chime that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And understand that there is a difference in good glass and cheap glass, between good design and cheap design. There is a difference. Is spending $2,000 on a scope a good idea to throw on a break barrel Springer? Honestly, probably not.
No.
Because most of those scopes are not Springer rated.
Correct.
You do want to look for that when you're shopping for a scope for a Springer. You want to make sure that thing is definitely going to be rock solid at that job. And that's going to bring me to my first entry for this podcast, Pat. I'd like to talk about a scope brand that probably I'm going to say 85-90% of the people consuming this podcast have probably never heard of, because you hardly hear anybody ever talk about them. And it's Optizon. And they are a brand that I think is unique to Utah Air Guns. The lady who owns that company actually comes to RMAC every year. And she is absolutely, if you didn't know who she was, you wouldn't know who she was, because she's very low profile. She just kind of moves through there like a ghost.
Yep.
But Optizon is kind of the house brand that they operate under. I know for a fact, but I'm under penalty of death. I can't divulge who they make scopes for, but they do manufacture for other companies under their brands. But she has got game, and her glass is unique and world class. I won one at RMAC a couple of years ago, and it was one that I had lusted over for a while. And I thought it would have been good for field target until I found out it didn't have the 16X marking on it. And I was like, damn it, Lily, this was so good. And it was good because the focus, and for those that don't understand how important the parallax focus is on a field target scope, Most scopes perform very well if they're rated to 10 yards. Between 10 and 20 yards, there's a lot of delta in your pellet rise. And having accurate range information from that scope in those ranges is super important. I can tell you it doesn't really freaking matter from 20 to 35 yards because you're in the flat region of that pellet's trajectory there. So the effect of a focus error, measurement error in that region isn't that big of a deal. But this is where it gets seriously dicey. And this is where the wheels come off the bus a lot in scopes, is that 35 to 55 yard range. You honestly, it's really hard to get that crisp pop, that snap that you get when you because you always have to come at the measurement from the same direction. Otherwise you take the play of the scope into account. And again, better scopes, less play.
Correct.
Better scopes, the gear train is optimized for the ranges that we care about. And honestly, the amount of support we get from the scope makers of the world for field target is really about that big, maybe even smaller than that. But there are scopes that are really better than others in that. And I have to say the Optison EVX was actually frustratingly good at that range and giving you a decent focus pop. I'm told that focus pop has a lot to do with the length of the optic. I don't have any data. I was really hoping that Pat was going to harvest a scope expert to come on for this episode, but we didn't get that. But it, having that ability to delineate distances accurately is important for us air gunners because we do have that loopy trajectory, and it is an easy way without looking at another piece of gear, a rangefinder or whatever, to know your dope, right? That's really what matters, is knowing your dope and what your holdover is. But the other Optison I want to mention is the CP3 to 12. It's more expensive than the EVX. The EVX is a really big, really high quality glass scope, super bright, super clear image, but it's huge. It's huge. Yeah. The CP3 to 12 is one of the most compact scopes, and it's not just compact in that it has a smaller objective lens. The whole thing is optimized for being squatted down against that gun as low as possible. And when you do that, the amount of parallax error that you have gets reduced dramatically. It is ridiculously good. And it will, if I ever shoot in a field target pistol match, that will be the piece of glass that I put on that gun. Now, recently, there's been a change in the rules for AFTA, where you don't have to have the scope only go up to 12. It can go up higher, but you have to have it on 12. I would still use that scope because from 10 to 30 yards, you're shooting in an area that you can adjust your zero, so it's almost dead flat in that region. It's really, really good. So those are my two from Optison that I have experience with and I really like, and I encourage you all to look at Optison when you're in the scope shopping mode. One of the other things that really intrigued me in this preparation for this show, as some of you may know, I did an interview with David, who is the owner of UTG, Leapers UTG Integrix. Integrix is a new brand. And I think before I get into that, Pat, we're going to take one of your scope brands that you investigated and talk about those, because people are probably really tired of hearing me talk.
Yeah, I don't think they get tired of you, Bill. But yeah, so I wanted to start with, I think, from my experience through my day job, one of the most popular, what they would call discount, I want to use the word lightly, budget scope, and that is the UTG/Leapers line. So you were talking about springers, and I get this question all the time. Hey,
let me pause you right there.
Sure.
The CP3 that I raved about
Uh-huh.
is also Springer rated, but do go ahead.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it is.
So I get so many calls throughout the day. Hey, I put this scope on it, that scope on it. I got 5 shots. I got 100 shots, and then I'm all over the place. And I'm like, well, what do you have it on? And they're like, oh, it's on a Hotsun or it's on a RWS or whatever. And I'm like, those scopes aren't spring rated. And they're like, what are you talking about? And then I got to explain that
that's a lesson for a broken heart.
Yeah. And then I got to explain what a dual recoil is. I says in a dual recoil, the normal recoil you get on a firearm is one way. It's backwards, comes towards you. On a spring gun, it's forward and reverse at the exact same time. And it just tears scopes that aren't designed to deal with that type of recoil.
They're actually 10 milliseconds apart, but I'll give you that.
Okay, 10 mil. Okay, thank you.
I only know that because I freaking measured it.
Yeah, I remember that. And I tell them, I go, well, here's what I'm going to recommend. But it's not your top of the line scope, and your top of the line scopes aren't really Springer rated. There's very few. So I'm like, there's a Leapers UTG scope that I've had. God, I've been airgunning 14 years for about 11 years now. And it's on the gun everyone drops, Bill. And I'm like, oh. But you know what? It's a Leapers. Was it a 4-16 by 44 SWAT compact scope? It looks like it's been through the war, but it still is putting them where you're aiming. It's doing its job.
Yep.
I've had it on spring guns. I've had it on PCPs. I've had it on CO2 guns. It's been the scope that gets bounced around. It's the red-headed stepchild, and no problems. So a lot of times, like when I'm selling stuff during the day, they're like, oh, I don't like the budget scope that this XYZ rifle comes with. What do you suggest? A Leaper scope. Whichever one you can afford. And then we got to go make sure it's proper length, which is another nice thing about the Leapers UTG line, is there's different lengths. There's your regular SWAT, which is longer, and then there's a compact one. So like the Gammo Swarm. You can only be so big because it's got that big magazine that comes up. So you got to be able to clear that. And then off you go. And then I get in the conversation of, well, can I put a Hawk scope on, which we'll talk about the pros and cons to the Hawk line. And I'm like, they're really not rated for spring guns.
None of them
are? They sort of are. Their lifetime warranty. We'll talk about Hawk. There's one scope, since we're going to talk about Hawk for 1 second, that says not for an air gun over 12 foot-pounds. One out of their whole line. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into what I don't like about the lower end Hawks versus the Sidewinder series and up. We'll get to that in a second. But the Leapers are great. The glass, in that, like you were saying, in the evening and dusk, you got some issues. You got some parallax error. You got some quality.
You got a budget optic.
You got all that.
You're getting lower quality glass.
Yep.
Lower quality design, optimized to save you money. So, yeah, correct. I mean that's why we're saying spend as much as you can on the optic, because it may not be permanently on that gun. It may move on to a secondhand FX gun tomorrow, or it may move on to your day state you've always lusted after. So, why buy a scope now that is going to be forever stuck on that Avenge X? But yeah, go ahead.
But it's a good budget scope that could take a beating and keep on ticking.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Would I put it on my impact and shoot 100 yard? No. no, not at all. But it gets the job
not gonna
done.
win a bench rest match with
No,
that. Not gonna happen.
no. For most air gunners, I would say a good 80% of them that are just getting out there want to go shoot the groundhogs, squirrels, whatever. Great scope, guaranteed for life,
Minute of squirrel at 50 yards,
all day long.
pretty low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Minute of Bud Light can, yeah, you
Yeah.
got this. You're gonna bust some cans. But again, 100-yard bench rest or
Mm,
really trying to thread a pellet into a target and create a
yeah.
very quick kill. That's a different order of magnitude.
Now I'm gonna bring up Philip Hepler for a second.
Oh boy, we love Phil.
Yeah, the 3 year
What's his
running
nickname,
champion.
Pat?
What's that?
What's his nickname?
Deadeye?
Deadeye. Right.
Yeah.
You
Wow.
if that guy's in your match, just hand him the trophy and the money, walk away. Save you some
Well,
time.
you know what gun he took the national champion in 2019, and then in 2020, no national champion. Then 2021, so the longest reigning, and we always pick on him about it. He was running a UTG True Hunter
On a
on a
$4,000 PCP air
no,
gun.
he wasn't using that yet. He didn't have that yet.
You didn't have that yet?
No, he didn't have that yet.
He did use that same scope on it.
He did. He did. He started out with a secondhand Marauder with the True Hunter, and then he graduated into a Day State Red Wolf, still with the True Hunter. And trust me, we've made fun of him. And then he finally graduated into whatever he's shooting now.
Probably more out of shame than actual need.
Well, he says, "Why fix what's not broken?"
I can't
He's
disagree.
knocking the paddles down. They're going down. Okay. Can't complain. You know what I mean? So that was a True Hunter.
If it works, is it stupid, Pat?
No.
No.
Don't, yeah. So he's upgraded to more expensive scopes now due to the quality and the level of competition. Although he was the national champion for 3 years. So we'll leave it at that with the UTG True Hunter.
I think wasn't he just 2 years? He had two.
Okay, yeah, that's the
It
joke.
was over a 3-year period, but he only won 2 champions.
Correct. Well, there was not one in
Third year
2020.
was a no start. So you're saying he was a reigning champion for 3 years.
There you go. Yeah.
Not that he won 3 champions.
Correct.
Champions.
Okay.
Got it.
Mr. Technical. Yes, that is correct. That's why it's like an inside joke, and I can hear him going, we didn't compete the 1 year, but you still had the title. So that's all that matters. And he's like, oh, he's such a humble guy. So a big thing is torture testing. So the reason that the UTGs are rated for springs is they actually test them for it. There's videos of them doing that dual shock recoil, and they are literally beating the Schmitz out of them. And they survive.
That's harder than building the thing that Art won't let us say out of it.
Correct. Yeah.
Beating the Schmitz out of it. That's taking it up a level.
It is. So I thought that was, they're great scopes. I have one. It's great budget scope. Leapers is always innovating, and they got some other lines, which Bill, you were insinuating towards, that we'll talk about a little bit later. So what's your
hang on, Pat, hang on. When we introduce our guest, we'll get there. Okay. Just
I know I'm so excited.
Keep your pants on.
I'm not wearing pants, I'm wearing shorts.
Oh, we didn't need to know that, Pat.
Just shorts.
Really?
Dress shorts. Yes.
Everyone, Pat has no pants on. Just saying.
It could not. You only could see from my element optics up.
We don't know. We don't really know.
That could go both ways, Bill. So what is your number 2 that you have?
So I was guilty, Pat, of being I don't want to say optics snob, but I felt like I had an allegiance to Element Optics. Only because I knew those guys and I had talked to them at length and They've been very kind to the Target Forge channel. And, I kind of thought, hey, here's pretty much the only scope company that I'm aware of that is almost everyone in the management team and the development team in that company is a freaking air gunner.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what people need to realize is that you can't design exclusively for Airgun World because we simply won't sell the numbers that these guys need to sell to make a living. And they
Mm-hmm.
really do need to make a living, but they do keep an eye on the airgun world, and they do give a nod to what airgunners need. But the whole point of this segue was that um, I I wouldn't talk to Athlon at RMAC because I kind of felt like I would be a turncoat, and that was so silly of me. It was absolutely a dumb way to approach that because honestly, when I started talking to the Athlon guys, I realized how insanely good a lot of their products are. Now, they're not made here in the US. They are a US owned company.
Mm-hmm.
Athlon is a US company, but their manufacturing is done offshore. But they understand what they want and what they want to bring. Now, one thing I am critical of Athlon for doing is a lot of their really good glass doesn't even start parallax until 50 yards, which that broke my heart. I'm like, guys, come on, throw us a bone here. But that being said, I did win an Argos
Mm-hmm.
at RMAC, and that you know forcibly opened my eyes to the Athlon world, and it was remarkable. In fact, that scope is still mounted um, on the gun that Utah Air Guns has lent to me, um, which is a remarkable, probably it's a pistol that I have competed against rifles in field target with and done really well. So the gun itself is capable of ridiculous accuracy. The scope is capable of ridiculous accuracy. My only critique in that particular unit, it does parallax down to 10 yards, but the wheels come off the bus when you get to that 35 to 55 yards. That's so important. I've given up more points there than anywhere else in that range. Like, well, you just can't hit shit when it's far away. Stuff when it's far away. But I I've been looking for what will be my next field target scope, and I wish something would come from the Athlon world because there is another Athlon product that I have purchased and I have found is ridiculously good, and that is their big tripod.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
have
knew you were going to say that.
I have their 40 millimeter carbon fiber tripod, and I'm telling you, if you dug a hole in the ground, sunk a sonnet tube, filled it with concrete and rebar, let it set up, it might be as rigid as that tripod is when it's set.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also give my very brief Cadillac story. Anybody who's met me knows I'm a fairly big guy. When I was in high school, I was 6'4". I've gone down to like 6'3" now in my decrepity. But when I was really tall and physically a pretty large guy, I was always used to being, the grandma in the car because the seats never went back very far.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never in a really affluent family where anybody had a really nice luxury car. And one of my uncles had retired and bought himself a big old Cadillac. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous car. And he asked me to take it down to the store because I think he just wanted me to experience that. So I drove down to the store, probably to buy something stupid like cigarettes or something. And I get in this car, and I'm like, the first thing I would always do when I got in a car was put the seat all the way back because That's the only position that works for me. Well, this was the only car in my limited experience at that point in time that I ever got in. And I was like, my arms were way out here, my feet were stretched out, and I couldn't reach the pedals. I'm like, oh my God, it's a car that's too big for me. Well, the reason I bring that story up is because the Athlon tripod, all of the tripods I have, and doing a YouTube channel, you end up with a ton of camera tripods and equipment tripods and tripods for everything. I've never had one that was as tall as it should be. The Athlon 40 millimeter is actually like 7.5 feet tall when it's fully deployed. And some people may be thinking, well, that's ridiculous. Nobody's 7.5 feet tall. Nobody's going to need that. I challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do when you're hounding up a mountainside and you're standing on the low side or you're standing on the high side? You have a challenge now of getting a tripod that is actually going to give you the right height for your weapon system or your spotting scope, whatever it is. And honestly, when that scope is 7.5 feet tall and you're on the downhill side of that, you can look through it all day long. It's at the perfect height. So having too much height is actually a really, really nice benefit that I never realized was even possible because I've never had it. Again, the best you have is the best you've ever ridden.
Correct.
The best you know is the best you've ever ridden. So until you crack that, and I thought all these guys walking around with these really expensive big ass tripods were just having a contest about something else that they were compensating. Okay, I didn't understand. I understand now. I totally get it.
Go shoot iguanas out of a tree, Bill. There's your local mountain.
I'm waiting for my invite, Patrick.
We're almost there. We're almost there. I got places. Yeah. I promise.
So back to scopes, back to optics.
Yeah. So back to the scopes. Yeah.
Where are we going next?
All right. So you mentioned Element, and I'm wearing an Element shirt. I'm a little bit of an Element fan because they work for me.
I've been a fanboy too. I can't deny that.
Also, where I work, I get them for a good price, and I got some good connections. But one thing I liked about Element that not everyone has, and we could talk about.
He knows a guy.
I know a guy. Is Element, for one, they got really good glass on their entry-level budget line, which is their Helix. But all of their line is they use stainless steel guts. Not everyone does.
You're talking about in the turret, right?
In the turret, the little indentations when you turn and it goes click, 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 click.
The detents, yeah.
Yeah, if you're a turret turner, which a lot of guys are, it goes from click, click, click to muffle, muffle, muffle. And then they wiggle. They get wore out. They do the wiggle, 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 And you're like, now you're all over the place. You're not accurate anymore. It's worn out. So I've
heard that lesser scopes, when you're using the range in the turrets, meaning the total amount of turns, when you're at extremes all the way down or all the way up, your ability to hold zero over time and vibration goes to hell on a handbasket. Is that true?
It does. And on top of it, and one big thing that Element did that was very important, in my opinion, is Matt Dubber did a video with tracking, which is what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. He would crank it all the way down and come all the way up. And there's an actual device that is overlaid to show you where the hairs meet when you go back to that original zero. And some of them, what's allowed is, I think it's 5 clicks. It's an extreme amount. I think it's 5 clicks.
That's a lot.
It's a lot where they could be off. It's a lot of them I've seen where they're like 1, and I had that issue with the early generation Athlons when I first started airgunning, because I started with an Athlon Argos. and it would move. And then the lines would be off on my knob. And I'm like, they replaced it, fixed it, and then I just quit turning turrets all the time. I would just use my holdover dots.
You channeled your inner Ted.
Yeah, my inner Ted. Yeah, yeah. I am no Matt Dubber or no Rolf or no Gerhardt. Where they're no, I'm not doing any of that. I'm also not shooting those distances, but that's a whole nother thing. What's your purpose? Comes out again. I like the value for them. I like the way they're made. I like the weight. Not a fan as an air gunner for the Titan. It's 2.5 pounds. I'm not a happy camper there. For a bench gun, great. But I've had some conversations with some people where they prefer the Helix over the Titan because they think the glass is better. And if you're going to do recording, the second focal plane Helix at the time was 6-24. Now they got 4-14 and all of that other stuff, but is really good camera quality for shooting. You could see that on Ted's holdover. He talks about it when he's doing different caliber barrels and all that other stuff. He's talking about the Helix scope and stuff. And now they went to what's their newest one besides the HD, the Theos. Now, that's a really high-end airgun scope, but that's meant for long range. That's what that's for. That would be the scope I would be using for bench if I had a sponsor. Element would be great.
Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Nudge, hint, nudge, nudge. Yeah, because at 100 yards, I shoot 22. Okay, that's a tiny, tiny little hole. And with that Theos being a 32 power with phenomenal Japanese glass, you're paying a lot for that glass and the mechanisms and all the fancy second rotation flag that flips and all of that stuff. Just good build quality with a true lifetime warranty. That's a big thing. They really stand behind it, and that means a lot to me. So I like the line. They go from generally it's the high 300s all the way up to the low 3000s. Pick your poison. Yeah. So that was a fan of mine, and that would be my next one. Now, what's your third choice? And I got one that I'm going to drill a little bit after you.
Well, you asked me for 3, and I've given you 3.
Because there's always one extra, Bill. You always have that one that's over here fluttering.
I would love one day to. I've heard rumors of a Citron coming out.
Oh,
that was actually designed for field target.
Okay.
And what I don't understand is whether or not it was designed more for hunter field target or world field target, which for those that don't understand, the delta there is in regular field target, you can be a turret diddler. You can move those dials. But for us true sportsmen, kidding. We have to use holdover only. We can't touch the scope once the match starts. So anybody who's shooting hunter class, that's one of your criteria. So I've always wanted a scope that really had that ridiculously crisp focus pop. Again, at 35, 55 yards. I mean, that's really where they earn their money. And I've never had one, so it would be nice to breathe an air of fresh air from that experience. But the chances that I'm ever going to plunk down the amount of money on a Citron, I mean, they're even on the used market, they still hold their value pretty well. I've heard Night Force has some really good glass there too, but again, getting one that actually ranges or parallax ranges down to 50 yards or even has an adjustable parallax on a side wheel. That's really what's going to make my criteria. So if anybody who listens to the Airgun podcast or watches the Airgun podcast has this sleeper like, Bill, you've never heard of this brand, you really need to check this out. Do pass that forward and let me know. And while we're on the topic of reaching out to your Airgun geeks, I want to say, freaking Bonnie is in the lead in our email.
You read my mind. That's what I was looking down earlier.
We have actually had some response from you all. We need to see more. So come on, boys, step up. Pull out your little bleep blop machine and send us an email and request a sticker and let us know who you're voting for. But right now, Bonnie is clearly in the lead. And I'm sad to say, Pat, she has 100%
yes
of the votes. So apparently you and I are chop liver.
I'm gonna read the email.
And Bonnie is the star.
Yes.
Well, this guy actually chops us down like freaking firewood, man.
Oh, so first off, everyone, it says attention Bonnie. Yeah, forget Bill and Pat.
Forget it. They don't matter.
And it says, I couldn't stand to see either of the guys overburdened with pride.
Well, that's quite.
Put a dash after that.
Actually, in a way, that's quite kind of him, Pat. He's looking out. He's looking out for you and I.
Yeah. Oh wait. He puts a dash after that.
Oh.
It says, especially when Bonnie is the real gas in the tank anyway.
Oh, snap. Wow. I
would love a sticker. His name is Mark Pace. We absolutely love it, Mark. Bonnie was, she can't fit in the room right now because her head's so big, and she deserves it. So your sticker will be sent out. And I appreciate you listening.
Hopefully he gets it by the time this podcast comes out. Hopefully he's absolutely racked with indecision of where he's going to put that prize sticker.
Correct. So we appreciate you telling us where you've been listening to us, that you've been spreading the word, and that you enjoy it. We love emails like that all the time. Definitely tell us about the sticker when you get it, what you think of it. We absolutely love it. So yeah, we're a little behind the 8 ball on that one. But I wanted to touch on one topic before we go into the last scope. So, Bill, we're doing hunter field target. You talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Explain why you don't want to have a scope where you're shooting, because I know it's 16 power on hunter field target. Why you don't want a scope that only goes to that, but you would want one that would go up to 20 or 24, but come down to 16. It has to do, if I remember, with the clarity of the glass at the lower powers.
Interesting that you bring that up, because I would like to add that what Pat is alluding to is that many scope manufacturers give us a little marketing trickery where they've asked engineering to give them more X than they originally asked for. And what that leads to is generally, you can dial it up to 20 gazillion X, but your image looks like crap. So don't buy your scope where the magnification you want to use it at is right at the edge of the top of your scale. Don't work there, because many scopes don't look really great when they're jacked up like that. There is one exception that I have noticed, and I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's that dang CP 3-12 from Optizon.
I have to agree with you. Yeah, go on.
looks freaking gorgeous at 12x. And I would have no reservations at all about using that scope all the way jacked up, because it looks just as good at 12x as it does at 3. And they obviously didn't play that game. They took the marketing guy that day and locked him in the closet next to the water cooler and did not let him out. And that was a benefit to all of us air gunners, because that is a sweet little piece of glass.
It is.
And honestly, as far as compact scopes, I've not looked through one that was as good as that piece of glass, or as small.
The only piece of glass that I've looked through that I think is equivalent or just a hair better is my prism scopes. I mean, that's a totally different type of glass, but it's the only one. And I looked through a lot of scopes.
Not only different type of glass, but a fundamentally different design optically. It's fundamentally different.
The other thing to say too about the Optizons is there's no parallax error. It's very minimal, even at that high magnification for that scope. It's I sound like an Optizon salesman now. But when you're passionate, you're passionate. So,
and so many people have never heard about them. And
I didn't hear about them until I started hanging out with Utah Airguns people, and I'm like, Optizon, because at the time I ended up getting a Leshy, and I was trying to find a scope for it, and Justin was like, "This one, this is the one you want." It was not in my budget at the time. And I'm like, But I was also looking at getting into the prism scope so that I can learn and talk about them. And I just fell in love with them and learned who makes them and all of that. And there's really one main company, which, you know what, I'll make that my last one and I'll skip over the other one. I have to mention it. So Hawk scopes. Here, it just gets my goat. Just gets my goat. And I tell him that all the time. You see, I'm getting all huffy puffy now. Why would you, Bill, I want you to answer this because you got to know. Why would you put a mill reticle in a scope with MOA gearing in the turret? Why?
Because the guy who wrote the spec for the manufacturer screwed up.
Okay. So you let them know that they made a mistake.
I can't think of a logical reason why you would want that combination, because your feedback doesn't match your effect. So it's literally useless. Now I will share, for those that care, I started out, one of my first high-end scopes was a Sidewinder. And I had a Sidewinder on my Crown. And I put my scope camera through that and I shot, and I'm like, wow, this is great. Until I got a Titan and I put the same camera on the Titan. And later, when I was sitting in this editing chair, I noticed there was a marked difference in the optical quality and clarity and brightness between that Titan and the Hawk. And they were near upon very competitive price-wise. They were not very different from each other. And I'm like, well, boys, that's the last time you're going to get that dollar from me. Yeah. But I didn't want to smash the H brand, because we try not to do that to manufacturers. But that was my honest experience with Hawk. And I hope they hear this, and I hope they say, hey, you know what? The old crazy guy's got a point. Maybe we should look at this and try to improve. Or maybe. Well,
the reason I brought it up is because I get a lot of people throughout the day that I've talked to, and they're turret turners. And they're like, oh, I love this Hawk scope and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, did you research it? And they're below the Sidewinders. Okay, Sidewinders, I'll get to that in a second. So below that, and I'm like, you really don't want that? And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, it's a mill reticle with an MOA turret. And they go, what? And I get the question. I say, hey, send your feedback to Hawk. The glass is great. The quality's great. They're guaranteed for life. But when you physically go to functionally do stuff, you can't. So then I'll end up selling them like a Sidewinder.
And honestly, if you're only doing holdover,
yeah, if you're not turning,
it
you're fine.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But
you brought up that valid point. Yes,
if you're not a turret diddler, then you're not going to.
Yeah, because otherwise it's just a knob to move it up and zero it. If you're just doing that all day long,
you need a slide rule for your dope sheet and do a bunch of math. And who's got time for that when they're
so where that changes? Where that changes is the Sidewinders and up. It's a mill to mill, MOA to MOA. And I asked the Hawk guys, I bust their butts all the time, and they're like, I don't know what to tell, but we'll send the feedback up. Other than that, great quality scope unless you're a turret turner. That's the key here. If you're a turret turner, if you're not, great scopes. So, but I wanted to end our conversation before we get to our special guest on prism scopes, because they're starting to come in more and more popularity because Element has come out with prism scopes. But the prism scopes that I have are made by Immersive Optics. And if you research Immersive Optics and you go down the rabbit hole and you wiggle your feet enough and you get down, you'll find that Immersive Optics makes optics for a lot of the big brands that are out there. I won't mention them, but they're big brands. Like I have a 14 by 50 that would normally be with some $700, $800, $900, $325. Same thing. It just doesn't have the little doodads or accessories that would come with the other models. But I ended up doing RMAC speed shooting with my Leshy with a 10 by 24 prism scope, and it did great. I unfortunately was able to see everyone else shooting because of the field of view is 6 to 10 times more than a traditional scope is. But the other issue is, depending on your power, there's zero eye relief. That's another some people don't like. But if you want a prism, generally the 5 powers.
You definitely don't want that optic on a powder burner.
Definitely not. No, definitely even not. A 22 gets a little iffy. Like, but if you got like a 5 power, then you're fine. I have one of those that has a your regular 3-inch.
You got a collection of these things, Pat?
Yes.
Iguana business must be good.
I have a 5 by 30. I have a 10 by 24. I have a 14 by 50. So I have 3. Yeah. So, hey, the 14 by 50 is on the Katran that shoots the 177. I could see the whole tree and all the iguanas. So, it is what it is. But yeah, definitely there's different options and whatnot for what you're looking to do. It's all about what we have been saying. What's your purpose? So, all right.
Are we ready to get to our special guest?
We are ready to get to an awesome guy that you got to sit down and have a fantastic conversation with.
I did. I really enjoyed this interview with David. He is not what I expected at all. I had always had this perception that UTG was a brand that was hosted out of some Asian country. And that is absolutely not effing true. He is in Michigan. He employs American workers. He is totally a U.S. company. And it was an absolute joy to spend some time with David and talk about their new scopes, which are the Integrix. And they're still rolling these out. They're still coming out. They're still I won't say, I'm sure there's some in development still, but they're getting production ready for some more flagshipy optics. And yours truly has tentatively been invited out to the Michigan compound to investigate that a little more closely. And I hope we're able to make that happen sometime in late 23 or early 24. But that could be a real eye-opening experience. But join me as I get a moment to talk with David at the PA Cup and talk about the Integrix line of scopes. Here you go. All right, Airgun Geeks fans, we've got an interesting guest today. We have got David from UTG, Leapers, and your new brand, which is
Integrix. Integrix optics.
Yes. And, you know, a lot of you are familiar with the UTG product. It has always been a value-priced optic that is pretty reliable. I mean, they're pretty durable in the field.
Yes.
But you guys are into a new level of quality now,
Right.
with this new product. And tell us about it. Tell us what we can expect from this.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Bill, and
Great.
thank you for all your listeners and viewers.
Excellent.
Leapers, I'm the owner of Leapers, and we founded the company 30 years ago. Start with a very compact scope. After 30 years, as you said, that UTG is really foundation for our brand, and with optics and accessories, we design and manufacturing all these accessories ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Now, after 30 years, we, especially in the last 5 years, by listening to customers, interacting with customer experts, and being on the field, on the ground, we learn a lot more. And the other thing is we are able to get into the true, very fine optics design to manufacturing and build, testing, certification. It is a whole 30 years of efforts that we are able to design a new scope line, that's Integrix, and we design and make ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're not having scope made. And the other things, we line up with the very best lens sourcing, that is German shot glass.
Oh, wow.
To really to deliver the performance that we design. That's from the lens curvature, the lens thickness, the interlens, the air gap, all these components that when the inner working of scopes, when you do adjustment, when you do zooming, when you do distance from different distance adjustment,
Mm-hmm.
we are able to deliver that optimum performance
Mm-hmm.
with great field of view, image quality, clarity from center to peripheral, complete, and at different power, low to high power, as well as different distance. And very importantly, because we use shot glass, we have that over 92% light transmission.
Nice.
It gives you that low light capability.
You get that really bright, crisp.
Right.
image.
No matter today you are in bench rest, you are in field target at different environments, shadow, black, and different lighting conditions. You are able to have greater lights, guaranteed for over 2-digit percent, 10% or more. That also translates into shooting, easy to identify the target, pick up the target,
Mm-hmm.
maintain the target.
Right.
All these things are very, very important. I'm very grateful to know the community and stay in touch with the community for the last more than 2 decades.
Wow.
Now we have this, we like to set the highest standard for the optical performance,
Yeah.
and tailor the application for the focus group shooters.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
Excellent. Excellent. I know as a field target shooter myself,
Right,
the one thing I'm always looking for
right,
is that focus pop,
right.
right? We
Yeah.
want when we twist that parallax wheel, we want to always come from the same direction, and we want that really small, shallow depth of field
Right,
on the focus, so that
right,
when we get crisp image, we look at the range and we say, okay,
right.
that's 55 yards. I know what my pellet drop is at 55 yards. So that oftentimes on scopes that are designed for the firearms world, they don't care.
Right,
They're not really paying
Right.
attention to that.
right.
With this new scope design, is there any interest in bringing that level of attention to the focus area from 60 yards to 10 yards where air gunners are really using it?
See, that's exactly the point, because we know your requirements. So on these example, on this 6 to 36, is great for field target with that great field of view and and also the eye box is so consistent. On the parallax, as you can see here, from 10 yards and to 30 yards, you have fine distance that travel allows you to do the really adjustment. And then from 50 to 75, we allow that distance for adjustment, because I know that your 50 yard and 55 yard, that drop can 1.5 inches, for instance. And for the regular firearm, it doesn't mean as much. Correct. But for you hitting at the edge, not a center, it make a lot of difference.
Oh, sure. That's
So
the point, right?
yeah.
We fight for every point we can.
Yes. So I understand that. So we have this specifically made with this travel distance, especially from 10 to 30, 50 to 75, that really would have very satisfactory adjustment and allows you for aiming and shooting. Yeah.
Excellent. That is encouraging to hear that the needs of the field target shooter and air guns in general. I mean, honestly, most air gunners, if you look at 90% of the American market,
right,
they're shooting from 100 yards to 10 yards.
Yeah.
They're pesting
right
at 10 or 15 yards. They're trying to have accuracy competitions with their friends.
Right.
But that's pretty much the range.
Right.
You know, your average backyard shooter doesn't have that much room to shoot.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is always good to have really quality glass with thoughtful design.
Yes.
In the mix as well. So thank you for bringing it to us.
Yeah. Well, we also pay attention to reticle so that you really can use apply your techniques and pick up the aiming point and shooting points.
Excellent.
Right.
Do you offer a Christmas tree or a dirty regular?
Yes, we do, but it's not overwhelming.
Right.
As you can see here later, you can have a hands-on review. All right.
I look forward to it.
All right.
Well, David, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill.
Of all of the Airgun Geeks fans, thank you for joining me and giving me your time today.
We appreciate and we welcome and we invite your feedback.
Excellent.
Right?
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Now, welcome back, everyone. Bill, that was a short interview. How did you do such a short one?
I'm sorry, boss. I got everything I could out of the guy. Short of torturing him, I don't know what else I could have done.
But that was packed full of a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I've got to meet the guy too. In amongst my running around, he is such a nice guy.
Yeah.
Like he's too nice. I mean, he's so humble and he just wants to share what he does, that he's just so fun to talk to.
I would like to add to that he has done a remarkable job building an amazing team. When Pat and I were at the banquet and the award ceremony for the PA Cup, we got to sit at a table that was jammed with UTG, Leapers, Integrix people, and they were just outstanding to hang around with, and they were, you know, the kind of people that we air gunners tend to gravitate to, which are gregarious, kind, open, warm people, and all kudos to David for putting together a solid team, because if that's the way this little segment of his team looks, I can only imagine what the whole team looks like. And it is quite a large team. I had this foolish conception that UTG was a small company. Pat's like, are you freaking kidding me? They're huge. They've got a huge manufacturing center in Michigan. And that's when I really started to get even more into this and wanting to learn more about UTG. But I hats off to David, hats off to the UTG team. We love you guys, and we're so excited to bring the story of the Integrix optic line to our airgunning brothers.
Yeah, couldn't said it better. You know, I'm excited for a new scope line, especially in first focal plane.
Oh yeah,
because looking at them, I was like, these are fancy. you got any final words for this one?
Yeah, I got a word for our fellow air gunners. Do get out there and support the content, and it doesn't have to be us. It can be PJ, it can be Chad Kettner, it can be any of those guys who are trying to eke it out in this hyper suppressed world that is the outdoor content providers. It's where we live. It's where we try to earn our keep. Do look beyond what you think YouTube pays us, because it's a tough ecosystem.
Yeah.
And do seek ways to help us out if you can. It does matter, and it will keep this content alive and vibrant for you, and that's why we do this.
Correct. And and like always, we admire the feedback. It helps our pride and overgrowing heads, as some people would say. But
it keeps us in check, right? It gives us guardrails.
It does.
Have you ever seen Patrick with no guardrails? It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm a kite in the wind at times. But you emailing us, responding on the YouTube videos to Bill and myself, keeps it going, lets everyone know what's going on, lets us know what you're thinking.
Yep.
Helps us with content on what we should talk about.
Sure.
Because we're not mind readers. I want to say that, and we're always looking for.
I thought you were.
No, Bonnie is. Yeah, that's why she's got 2 stickers. She
So the CIA,
maybe. Don't all women. But keep that up. If you got events that are coming up, that would be in the new year. Make sure that you come to them. Check them out for the new year. We're working on trying to go to some of the big events together, but we'll see what happens.
And if you have a smaller event and you would like an Airgun Geek present for that, let us know.
Yeah.
And Pat and I usually have a very visceral way of making the decision of who gets to go. We typically wrestle for it. And honestly, Pat gives up really easy because he knows that I have the benefit of flight benefits, and he lets me go because I can fly there on the cheap. But do let us know if you'd like some Airgun Geeks presents at your next event. Could be a gun show, could be a shooting match, could be something that you think is special that we might be able to gather some stories while we're there. You know how I love to gather up stories and record them for prosperity. So that is another thing we'd love to bring to you guys.
Correct. And since you mentioned competitions, I got one up on you, Bill. We have the first annual Extreme Field Target going on. It's just north of Orlando. If you go to Atlas Airguns, you'll be able to, I think you can still register and whatnot. Looks like pretty good prizes, but it will happen the 1st and 2nd of December of this year. So nice. I will be there shooting. I don't know yet. I might even name the gun that. I don't know yet. But I'm going to go there and have fun and not be last. I'm going to keep that motto.
Yeah. And I would appreciate it if you would try and perform a little better, because we got to make back some of that money I lost on you at RMAC, because that was a bloodbath, my brother.
Some would call it a Schmidt show. But that would be me. So with that, we want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day or listening to us wherever you are on the drive, or even watching us. And again, leaving your feedback and whatnot. Bill and I greatly appreciate it. And like always, stay geeky.